go right into that. Pleasure to be here, everyone. My name is Mateusz Ciasnocha. I am a farmer from Poland who's on a mission of putting farmers at the center of climate change adaptation and mitigation efforts in a profitable way for those farmers. And that's directly rooted in our family farm example of transitioning from conventional farm that we were prior to 2004 to some kind of regenerative production that we are in right now. And so I would like to tell you about that in my presentation, with a particular focus on our family farm, and then maybe making a little bit more kind of high-level points at the very end. So our farm is located in northern Poland. We are farming in the region called Vistula Delta, which is one of the most fertile regions in our country. Having that said, our soils are relatively poor in that region, and historically very wet, historically used for hay production or grasslands. Having that said, we started farming in that region in the 1970s, and back then the area that we are farming right now was used for conventional cereal production. So a lot of plowing, a relatively poor rotation of wheat and rapeseed, high inputs, high environmental externalities, negative external environmental externalities, and negative cash flow from financial perspective for the farm. Our situation has changed in 2004 when Poland entered the EU, and of course we became bounded by the Common Agriculture Policy with all its plus and cons. And the mindset of the farm back then and till today was, let's not fight with the Common Agriculture Policy, but let's leverage it to our biggest benefit. And so we have transitioned in 2004 onwards to as we like to call it right now, Regenerative Agriculture 1.0, in which we transition from planting fall cash crops to spring cash crops with minimum tillage, cover crop, which was mustard in our case, and we've also started trading straw, which was a problem to incorporate that in the soil due to minimum tillage, which provided important extra revenue for the farm, extra profitability. The way we are operating the farm right now, and I will show you a few photos of that just now, is we are in permanent grassland without any chemical inputs, with the exception of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, which we are spreading basically right now. Today we are working on the farm and we are spreading fertilizer as well as trolling the fields with 50 kilograms of urea. That's it. That's the only external input that we are using for the farm. So we are, the principle that we follow as principle number one is keeping the soil covered all year round and working with the cycles of nature. I've mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, this region has historically been grassland or meadows, and thanks to the opportunities that Common Agriculture Policy provided, we've basically returned to that native habitat that was here in this land. In terms of some of the challenges as well as the opportunities we are having for improving the soil health / profitability of the farm, we are using the most basic techniques, which we found are working the best for us, and that's basically reseeding the grass or the meadows with new seeds every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the conditions and depending on how markets are changing as well, so that our grass mix is reflective of what the consumers want to buy. And in terms of the challenges, the biggest challenge when we've been farming conventionally and now in grassland is and remains to be compaction, which is created by kind of two forces. One is, of course, the machinery we are using, which is compacting the soil, so getting like the right mix of the size of the machinery, so that we are kind of following the same tracks every year is really important to us. And the second reason why the soil gets compacted is the rainfall. As mentioned before, our soil is historically very, very wet, and this natural amount of water that is in those soils just adds to the compaction. And so we are trying to deal with that reality by using mechanical means like the subsoiler presented, and by just letting the nature do the work and not interfering with the cycles of nature. The biggest positive benefit that we are quantifying of the change that we have undergone on the farm is additional carbon sequestration in our agricultural soils, which according to the Cool Farm tool is roughly 6.5 tons of CO2e per hectare per year over the 20-year span since the start of the transition. And that's also why we started European Carbon Farmers, which is a business aimed at developing carbon payment mechanisms for the Polish farmers and promoting carbon farming as such. So move from intensive tillage to less intensive tillage, move from keeping the soil bare to keeping cover for living roots in the soil. And summing up, the way we see soil is, of course, central to our farm and our operations, but it's part of a bigger conversation about regenerative agriculture, in which we are focusing on the cycles of nature. And of course, the carbon cycle is the primary cycle that we care about. Now, being aware, just like we all are in this conference, that those cycles are connected, and you cannot talk about one cycle only, they are all connected. But our viewpoint for the time being starts with carbon cycle. And so we are currently in the process of taking soil samples to measure soil organic carbon to establish the scientifically validated baseline of where we are right now, so that we can track that going forward. As mentioned already, the problems experienced on the farm when it comes to soil were first and foremost compaction and erosion associated with that. And we've been always kind of, when farming conventionally, we've been having this challenge of, hey, it is either too wet or already too dry. So the conditions are not ideal. That goes back to my first point on the cycles of nature. When you are basically doing what this land supports the best, you have much less of that problem, which is our reality right now, meaning like we are simply fine with the fact that sometimes the soil is too wet. We'll start operations 2 weeks later, rather than when we should be spraying our rapeseed, which is not suited for this land. Some things to consider going forward, or which we are considering going forward, would be basically 3 that I will mention. We are thinking about establishing some cover crops in the permanent grassland to deal with this problem of compaction, and maybe adding some nutrients from the atmosphere, nitrogen captured by living plants. We want to be trailing higher cutting heights of grass, so that the roots get stronger and they deal with this compaction on their own, meaning in a natural way. And we are also thinking about integrating animals in our operation, not running that operation on our own within our business, but having an external farm or farmer working with us in that domain. So I'll stop here. Looking forward to your questions, both now and at any point in the future. Thank you for this opportunity.